console is useful for testing, but we really want to start seeing something happen in our actual speed meter. So let's delete the console node. Then if we go to our scene outliner, grab the text object from the previous lesson, and then drag it into our graph, a node will be created with the name of the object and a single output, labelled Object ID. This, when combined with other nodes, allows us to manipulate our scene object within our logic. Because we want to change the text within a text object, let's add a node called setText. Another way we can create a node is by pulling an output pulse onto an empty part of the logic graph. This will then give us a pop-up box where we can search and locate the setText node. This will create the node and the pulse connection. You'll see that this node takes two data inputs. One is the object ID, which tells the node which text object to set the text of. As we want to set the speed text, let's connect this up now. And the other input is of the string data type and is called text, which we can connect our add node output to. Once again, a conversion is created, and Incari also adds pulse connections to the correct places. Now when we press play and then press up, the text is now being updated within our scene. The next thing we are going to do is increment our value every time the up key is pressed. To do this, let's first create a new variable. And let's call it increment_step. And that will also be of the float data type. This variable will define the amount that the value will increase and eventually decrease by. Saving this in a variable as opposed to changing it on the add node itself has a lot of advantages. As projects grow in complexity, you will often find yourself referencing the same data in several places, and having a global value that affects every instance where this variable is used is much more manageable, as you only need to change the value once. So let's set the default value to 5, and then drag it to the graph and select Getter. Let's also set the default value of our speed to 0. Now we can connect the new variable to the second input data socket of our add node. If we press play and then press up, you'll see that something isn't working as one may expect. No matter how many times we press up, the text stays at 5. If we go back to our logic and investigate, we'll see that we are getting the value of our speed, but we aren't updating the variable to the new value once it is incremented. So to do that, if you remember from earlier, we can drag the speed value variable to the graph, and this time select Setter. Unlike the getter, this node has an input data socket, which allows us to dynamically change the value of our variable. So before we convert the value and set the text, let's update the variable. To do this, you can drag the node over the pulse connection, and before you release the left mouse button, hold Ctrl. Now the node was added between the two nodes. To plug the output data of the add node into the speed setter, we can control and left click the data input socket of the conversion node and drag it onto the input of the speed setter. The output value of the setter is the same as the input, so let's just plug that into the conversion node. And now when we press play, we see that the value is being incremented correctly. Also going to quickly set up the logic for the down arrow key press. So to do that, I can click and drag to select all of these nodes, and then press Ctrl and D to duplicate them. Then I'll drag them down here, delete the add node, then create a subtract node because we want to decrease the value. And then we'll just fix our pulses and connections. And I also need to change the key attribute on the on key pressed node to listen for the down key. And now if we play this, you can see that the value is increased and decreased depending on which of the up and down arrow keys is pressed. In the next video, we will be reviewing our logic and seeing how we can improve it through optimization, decoupling and variable events.